Hi guys, in this video I would like to talk about line types. So this is actually covered in chapter 1 in your engineering drawing textbook, and if you turn to page number 9 in chapter 1, you would see the different types of lines that we're going to be using throughout this unit drawn there. Now to start off with, I'm only going to concentrate on 4 different line types. So the continuous thick lines, continuous thin lines, thin dashed lines, and thin chain lines. So I'll repeat: continuous thick lines, continuous thin lines, thin dashed lines, and thin chain lines. Okay, now if you look at this little image here, the specifications for the thin dashed lines and thin chain lines are given. Basically what that means is every dash is uniform, the gap between the dashes are uniform, and so if you take the gap to be 1 millimeter, then the length of your dashes should be 2 to 4 times that gap. So if I take my dash length to be 3, it's always 3. Okay, so if you look at these thin dash lines, every single dash has uniform gaps and uniform lengths. Now if you look at the thin chain lines, it's slightly different. You have a long line and a short line. Now again here, if I take the gap or S to be 1 millimeter, so the gap is always 1 millimeter, in that case my short line is 2 to 4, so that's just like my dash line, and my long line is 3 to 10. Now I would recommend that your long line is at least double the length of that, so it makes your center line obvious. So if you're taking 3, then take your long line as 7. So 3 millimeters, 1 millimeter, 7 millimeters. Okay, now how do you apply these lines? What's the purpose of using these lines? Have a look at the next slide. So what I've done here is I've got an isometric view or a 3D image of a cylinder, a simple cylinder. So it's sitting on its corner, so when you look at it, you can see the top face and that edge is hidden because it's behind, so you can't actually see it. Okay, so if I draw the front view for the cylinder, this is what the front view would look like. So I would just see that edge, that edge, that, and that. Okay, so in the top view, so if I look at it from top, I'll just see a circle. Okay, now if I'm looking at the side view, either right or left, I've drawn the right side view, so this is what it will look like. Okay, so look here, notice here that the axis or the line of symmetry is a center line. So I've used my thin chain lines here. Okay, these are my continuous thick lines. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. Continuous thick lines and thin chain lines. Okay, so I'll touch on these 2 lines in a minute. So continuous thick lines. Okay, and then I've got thin chain lines. Look at the continuous thick lines, as the name itself specifies that they are thick. So the thickness is much more than all the other lines. Okay, so they are thick lines. Continuous thin lines are nothing but imaginary lines which are used to line up the views. So the end points are all matching and the center lines are matching. So if you see here, I've drawn a side view. I've used projection lines or extension lines. So these are all continuous thin lines. They are imaginary lines. You use them only for construction so that the position of your views are correct. Okay. Now if you look at this cylinder here, that's a 3D view of a cylinder or an isometric view. The edge that is not seen, okay, is represented by dashed lines. So when would you use a hidden line? To represent an edge that cannot be seen in that particular view. So in this case we do not have any hidden edges, but later on as you start drawing more complex drawings, you'll be using hidden edges in these views as well. Okay, so to recap, continuous thick lines, any outer edge that's visible is drawn with continuous thick lines. So all visible edges are continuous thick lines. Imaginary lines or projection lines are continuous thin lines, and they are purely for construction purpose only. Okay, thin dashed lines for hidden edges, and the specification for that is here. And then thin chain lines, which are center lines, again the specifications for that is here. Okay, if you need time to process, re-watch this video, and then you can always go back to your textbook, page number 9 in your textbook, for specifications and all other line types. Thank you for watching.